Greetings, everybody. Bub Coons here, Carl Kirby right next to me. And hey, we're going to respond to something. But for now, go to r4h.com, debunk.org, get all our goods, get the app, and let's rock and roll right now. Okay, r4h.com, debunk.org, all kinds of stuff for you to see. We are on part 3 of Answering Mr. Forrest, Answering Skeptics Part 3. Now, let me remind you real quick, a while back, we released a video. It was called The Fossil Record Proves Evolution. Now, please listen to that title, The Fossil Record Proves Evolution. We're debunking that thing. That's what we're talking about. All we're doing is two things here. The fossil record does not prove evolution, and look out for deceptions. That was our whole point of the video, and Forrest responded. We're responding to him. Let's get started with part 3.
Here we go, the first clip to start us off.
But surely after all the time since Darwin, digging and discovering fossil after fossil, we have a more perfect geological record that supports evolution, right? Not even close, bud. Listen to how 2 renowned evolutionary biologists summarize the truth. Instead of finding the slow, smooth, and progressive changes, they saw in the fossil record rapid bursts of change, new species appearing seemingly out of nowhere and then remaining unchanged for millions of years, patterns hauntingly reminiscent of creation.
But there was no turning back, and biologists have, for the past century, fought over how best to explain the diversity of life. Does it arise from the gentle molding of genes by natural selection, or are there powerful, invisible hands at work that visit revolutionary changes upon the biotic world?
All right, Bub, the first point I want to bring up is what he just read. Thank you, Forrest, for reading more of the book, because it actually gave us a little more ammunition.
Article, yeah.
But what he just read would go counter to the claim that the fossils prove evolution? What in that quote was there? I mean, let's bring it up again so people can see it here. He said this, but there was no turning back, and biologists have for the past century fought over how best to explain the diversity of life. Does it arise from the gentle molding of genes by natural selection? Or are there powerful, invisible hands at work that visit revolutionary changes upon the biotic world? What in that quote right there contradicts our claim that the fossils don't prove evolution, Bub?
Nothing.
Oh, nothing?
There's my short answer. Yeah. There's nothing in that quote that says anything about what we're doing. A matter of fact, it fortifies our point.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. So I'll get further into the article as we go forward, but go ahead and make your point and let's keep moving forward.
Yeah, that's the biggie to me, man, is that, so you read more from the review, but it doesn't support the fact that we misquoted anything. He said what he said. So let's let him continue on and see what we get.
Yep. That quote that you just used was pulled from a review that Mark Pagel wrote about a book called The Pattern of Evolution. He wasn't saying that the fossil record supports creationism. He was giving a history of science and explaining how early evolutionary biologists were struggling to get away from the creationist model that had been so prevalent for so long. You just took an evolutionary biologist's review of a book about evolutionary biology and cited it as a scientific argument for creationism. What is wrong with you?
Well, Bub,
Hey, Carl, what's wrong with you?
All I can say is that what we did is we took a quote from someone who believes in evolution on a book that is teaching about evolution, and we quoted what they said. And this is exactly what they said. Instead of finding the slow, smooth, and progressive changes Lyell and Darwin had expected, they saw in the fossil record rapid burst of change, new species appearing seemingly out of nowhere, and then remaining unchanged for millions of years, patterns hauntingly reminiscent of creation. That's exactly what he said.
And let me say why he said it, okay? You read the whole article, you can pick this up in a PDF form. The review is 1999. So what happens is Mark Pagel's reviewing this book, right? And so he starts, like Forrest said, kind of given a history of kind of what's going on. And basically he said, hey, there was this creation model. But along comes Lyell, who just basically proclaimed, hey, maybe there's not stasis and maybe the Earth is old. Okay, and then Darwin came along and proclaimed, said he had a naturalistic, materialistic explanation for species. Right? So all these paleobiologists, people, they go nuts. They can't wait to look at the evidence and see everything. But what happened? This is where that quote comes up, instead of finding the slow, smooth, and progressive changes. So that's his quote about that. So Pagel's being honest about the thing. And then he goes back and says exactly what he's saying. But there was no turning back. What's the no turning back? Well, they didn't want to give up on the fact that there's no evidence to support that, and they kept fighting despite the evidence.
Exactly.
Okay,
right.
and now, and they asked the question. Okay, there's the two things. Does it arise from the gentle molding of genes by natural selection, or are there powerful invisible hands? That's exactly what the battle has always been. It's a battle of worldviews, but it's the evidence proclaims exactly what he just says. Okay, nowhere in the remaining unchanged for millions of years patterns hauntingly reminiscent of creation. That's all we're saying. The fossil record shows that. It doesn't show the gradualism. That's why all these guys were crazy and couldn't wait to go look at Lyell and Darwin's, what they thought would be there, and it ain't there. That's our point.
It wasn't there, and it isn't there. And the reason I love this quote so much is because what did he just do for us, Bub? He allowed me to name who those invisible hands were. His name is Jesus. By him,
God
for
Almighty.
him, all things were created. And if he created the way that he said that he did, we should find exactly what we find in the fossil records: stasis and abrupt arrivals.
just like they said, unchanged things. So hey, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Then he goes and tells us how he created, and guess what pops up in the geology that we look at, like we think it should be.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now there's a reason. There's a reason why he can't accept that, though. And Dr. Lewontin gave us a very good understanding of why this battle is still going on. It's not a battle over the evidence. It is a battle over the interpretation of the evidence and a worldview battle.
Still a fight going on.
And here's what he said. He said, our willingness to accept scientific claims that are against common sense is the key to an understanding of the real struggle between science and the supernatural. We take the side of science in spite of the patent absurdity of some of its constructs, in spite of its failure to fulfill many of its extravagant promises of health and life, in spite of the tolerance of the scientific community for unsubstantiated just-so stories, because we have a prior commitment, a commitment to materialism. It is not that the methods and institutions of science somehow compel us to accept a material explanation of the phenomenal world, but on the contrary, that we are forced by our a priori adherence to material causes to create an apparatus of investigation and a set of concepts that produce material explanations. That's where the battle is, Bub. That's why we have this thing going on, and he can't see what I'm talking about. I can see what he's talking about, but I just disagree because the evidence doesn't support it. And I've got a creator that said he did it the way that he said that he did.
Yeah, so far it's lining up with the creator, but I think the next part of what Lewontin said is like
very important,
even more persuasive. And hey, he's just being really intellectually honest, which is thank God. He understands that he's leaving out miracles. He understands that he's leaving out all kinds of the supernatural, and this is what he says. No matter how counterintuitive, no matter how mystifying to the uninitiated, for we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. That's what he's saying. This scientist, like many scientists, say
he believes in evolution.
Who believe in evolution are going to put aside everything except what they see. Problem is, they're using the laws of logic, things that they can't see. They're relying on their memory and their eyes and ears to kind of take in data, which evolution can't explain. There's so many other highly philosophical things that they got to get through first to even get to the point. But he's at least being honest, all right?
Yeah.
I can't allow God in the door, so therefore I have to explain things without God. Good luck.
That's right.
This is what you get, a mess.
That's right. And so what's wrong with this, Bub, is that we're not willing to turn a blind eye to the fact that you're saying this, but the evidence isn't there to support it. You are saying that, yes, we know there's no evidence for transitional fossils in the case of Darwin, but the reason we don't have the evidence is because we don't have the fossil record. And
correct.
We're not going to turn a blind eye to that. It's like, here's what the evidence is, and this is, you make the interpretation on it. I'm standing with the fact that those invisible hands that you know are there, could possibly be there. That's Jesus. So, and we have another clip here. Let's jump on it. See what we got.
The fossil record doesn't show gradual change, and every paleontologist has known that ever since Cuvier, or however you pronounce that.
Do you know what that quote was about? Punctuated equilibrium. It's a model for understanding the fossil record. It doesn't go against evolution. It's a way of understanding evolution. Do you know who came up with the idea of punctuated equilibrium? Stephen Jay Gould.
Bub. Stephen Jay Gould. Bub.
SJG, bro.
Stephen Jay Gould.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we don't follow people, by the way. Stephen Jay Gould. What are we
we
going to
just
do?
follow the evidence. What are the evidence that he followed, I wonder? What else did this guy say?
I like Stephen Jay Gould. As a matter of fact, there's an interesting article that he wrote, and in there he wrote this. This sorry situation led us to postulate our alternative model of punctuated equilibria. Anything interesting jump out at you there, Bub?
What was the sorry situation, I wonder?
A sorry situation led us to have to come up with punctuated equilibria, a way of explaining evolution. I wonder what it could have been. Right. How about we go read?
It was the lack of fossil records. But here, go ahead.
Let's read some of his writings. Let's go to New Scientist, and he said this. An average species of fossil invertebrates lives 5 to 10 million years. During this time, they rarely change in any fundamental way. They become extinct without issue, looking much as they did when they first appeared. What does that support? That one thing stayed one thing.
Hauntingly reminiscent.
Never changed from or into anything else. Oh, but there's more. There's more. He's got some more
please,
of this sorry situation. And he said, the absence of fossil evidence for intermediary stages between major transitions in organic design, indeed our inability, even in our imagination, to construct functional intermediates in many cases, has been a persistent and nagging problem for gradualistic accounts of evolution. Are we saying that Stephen Jay Gould doesn't believe in evolution?
Of course not.
He believes
in evolution, yeah.
What's
He's
the
trying
argument?
to find models to prove it. Right? But our point of the video was the fossil record does not show gradualism. It doesn't show what Darwin predicted. We even used Darwin's quote, and then we came up and said, yeah, that's what he quoted. We looked back then, nothing's there. We look here now, here's what Stephen Jay Gould is saying. He's confirming our point. There was no evidence of gradualism, so he had to bring up a new model called what?
That's right.
Punctuated equilibrium, however you want to say it.
Yep.
It's like, why? Because in the fossil record,
Yep.
there was stasis and no changes for...
Read his next quote, Bub. Read his next quote.
The extreme rarity of transitional forms in the fossil record persists as the trade secret of paleontology. The evolutionary trees that adorn our textbooks have data only at the tips and nodes of their branches. The rest is inference. However reasonable, not the evidence of fossils. Oh.
And there's one
more. What is
more.
our thing? The fossil record proves... Okay.
Yeah, and there's one more. I think you got to jump on this one too, because we're identifying this sorry situation. Please take a look.
The long-term stasis following a geological abrupt origin of most fossil morphospecies has always been recognized by professional paleontologists. What? Long-term stasis, abrupt origin. I'm sorry. This is our whole point of the video.
Pattern,
point one, right?
Hauntingly reminiscent of creation. That's all we're saying, man.
I don't know why this is so difficult to understand. Maybe he's misunderstanding that we're saying other stuff about evolution, but all we're talking about here is the fossil record, right?
He knows what we're saying.
And
it can't be accepted because the minute you allow for there to be a creator, those invisible hands, the minute you allow that, then guess what? The naturalistic processes, that means if there's a creator, we're going to be held accountable for our actions. And I think there's a big rebellion going on. People don't want to be held accountable. It's not because of what the evidence says. It's because of the interpretation of the evidence. And these aren't quote mines, all right? This is what they believed evolution. We concede that point to you, so quit bringing that up. These people believed in evolution. They had to explain away the lack of transitional fossils. And there's one more by Stephen Jay Gould's buddy that helped him create punctuated equilibrium, Mr. Niles Eldredge. And he says this: no wonder paleontologists shied away from evolution for so long. It never seemed to happen. Assiduous collecting I love this. Assiduous collecting up cliff faces yields a rate too slow to account for all the prodigious change that has occurred in evolutionary history. When we do see the introduction of evolutionary novelty, it usually shows up with a bang, and often with not firm evidence that the fossils did not evolve somewhere. So guess what?
Okay.
That's
I mean,
a
over
sorry
and over,
situation.
all these people, yeah, who are actually evolutionists. They
Yep.
look honestly at the evidence in the ground,
Yep.
and one after the other says it seemed to has never happened. There's
Right.
introduction of novelty. It usually shows up with a bang.
Yep. And then stays the same
Like
for
that's-
5 to 10 million years, and then disappears the same that it appeared. That's Stephen Jay
That's
Gould.
the whole point of the video. I'm
Yep.
really confused why there's a reaction to this when it's the consensus that the fossil record does not prove evolution, not even close. It actually
We're
has
going to get to that,
patterns
I think.
hauntingly- okay.
I think we're going to
Okay.
get to it because, you know, later on it comes down to evolution. What do you mean by evolution? But that's not this episode.
Sure.
That's coming up, and that's why we have this thing that's driving us apart. Let's play this one last clip here.
Okay.
But I did find this exact quote cited in this book here called Creation and Evolution, Compatible or in Conflict by J. Seegert.
All right, Bob. We used a quote that was also used in a book by J. Seegert. And so we're going to deal with it.
Time
next
to get attacked, I guess. And, you know, I just don't understand it. I'm actually starting to get frustrated because I just don't understand it. We tried to make a couple of points in the video, and they're crystal clear, and he's building straw men and all kinds of misdirection, and not. It's just
Big
simple.
time
Anyway,
misdirection.
yeah. For more stuff about R4H and Debunked, go to r4h.com, debunked.org. Grab our app. It's worth it. Share it. We really hope all this stuff helps build your faith, and if you're a skeptic on the line, at least gives you a reasonable facts and data for you to consider between the two of these worldviews, which they are, and hopefully that leads to the truth, and the truth will set you free. That's Jesus. Amen. Adios.
Amen. Go dig for yourself. Don't trust us. See ya.